Hello and welcome back to Down to the Tyre. Now, on this podcast, we like to focus not only on the drivers and the people who are often at the forefront of the motorsport industry, but we also like to shine a spotlight on the people who are often overlooked in motorsport. So today, I'm joined by Dan, who is a championship winning performance and race engineer. Dan, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm brilliant, thank you. I'm so excited to chat to you. I've been following you on Instagram for a little while now and keeping up with all the stuff that's going on. And I love the fact that you speak so openly about your career over on Instagram, because we were saying just before we started recording this that it's a career that I think a lot of people have quite a few misconceptions over, or they don't fully understand everything that the role entails.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Firstly, I just want to kind of, for people who might not follow you or might not know about the championships you work in, I was wondering if you could just tell us a bit more about the championships that you have worked in, either past or present, different teams you've worked with, or different drivers you've worked with as well.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so currently I'm doing British F4 with Excel Motorsport, who I did the UAE Championship with as well over the winter. I year before was with Argenti Motorsport. Sort of left halfway through the year to go full-time engineering, as I was a number one for them at the time. Before that, I was kind of everyone's from a number two to the truckie to race engineer for a company called Swallows Racing, which was classic touring cars. And I did 2.5 years with them and brought. Eventually, we all went up to be championship winners in classic touring cars, and we the last championship, which was 2022, we pretty much whitewashed it. It was 14 races, 12 wins, and two second places. Um, I did last year some British GT and Brit Car Championship, the sort of British Endurance, and some British Touring Cars as well. And now this year, like I say, alongside Excel with the F4, I do the Brit Car Championship still, some LMP for the Masters, which is a Le Mans, LMP3, which is a Ligier. As well as that, I am currently in talks with a team about doing some Ginetta GT4 stuff as well.
Amazing. Anyone who listens to this podcast will know that almost every episode I mentioned that I live down the road from Donington Park. So
Okay.
pretty much most championships that you mentioned there are ones that I go to so regularly. I was literally at the classic touring cars like a couple of weekends ago.
I would have been there at the same time as well then.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I absolutely love Donington. I just love the British motorsport. I've not ventured to any other tracks yet, like Oulton Park or Snetterton, but any opportunity to talk about the UK motorsport scene, I won't shut up about it.
It's quite a very well catered for country in that aspect. Certainly when you go to somewhere like UAE, where there's two, maybe three circuits that you'll kind of do. So the UAE Championship is just Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and potentially Kuwait if we head over there, but it's rare that we do that now.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the main championships that you mentioned that I haven't been to, surprisingly. I've
Yeah.
not ventured there, not ventured further than Donington Park, and UAE doesn't tend to come to Donington. So yeah, no, that's so cool. And obviously, yeah, feeder series podcast mainly, British F4 you mentioned, as well as F4 UAE. And one thing I was really curious about is obviously you're used to working with drivers who are more experienced, but also drivers who are very young, often teenagers. Sometimes it's their first single seater championship, with it being F4. I was really curious about how your role kind of differs when you're working with some of these younger drivers compared to some of the other championships you mentioned, because I imagine you kind of have to change your approach slightly when you're working with people who are so young and people who are still learning a lot both on and off track.
Yeah, definitely. So um even with pros, particularly like British GT, British Endurance, you're still working on driver, even at that level. The main thing we tend to work on with the pros is their bleed off on the brakes. that tends to be the main point that they always stick on. And you, particularly when you come to GTs and not so much British touring cars, but the GTs in particular are very heavy on technology. So you need to force sort of the drivers to use the ABS, to use the traction control. As no matter how good that driver is, they will never outdrive a motorsport traction system. Um, so you just need to get them to use it, and that's half the time. Or sort of, you can look at it and go, "You're not using all of the braking force there. You know, the ABS is not activating, and the traction control is not activating when you should be seeing it." It's quite nice when you're doing the pro am stuff because you've got a really good bit of data to go and kind of right. That's where you're losing 10 a tenth. You're losing two there, and so on and so forth. Um, with the younger drivers, it's the main thing is the braking point and confidence. So the driver I'm working with in British currently, I don't know if he's been announced yet, so I won't mention any names. He at the beginning hadn't done any driving of a single seater whatsoever, so I had to start from the beginning, including all the clutch control. So teach him how to pull away. As such, the first session was pretty much just pulling away and stalling in the pit lane, dragging him back to start again. But after that, we got him up to speed fairly quickly. He was a very quick learner in terms of general pace. His sort of low speed stuff is very, very good. And the confidence in the high speed, because he's come from karting, the difficulty for him is in karting, it's the worst thing in the world to go off. And they're kind of really have that hammered home into them. But then when they jump into a new car, they're scared of going off or they're scared of using all of the track and a little bit more. So you have to find different ways of getting drivers to make mistakes and find where that limit is and bring it back. So that's you have to work particularly with the driver and find out um, how how they work, how their heads work, and how they respond to making mistakes. You'll find some drivers have really beat themselves up over making mistakes, and then you've got to go, no, that's fine. This is what I want you to do. Others are kind of scared of the reaction from you, or so you kind of almost have to encourage it, particularly if they're not pushing the limits of the car. I say the driver I've got currently is brilliant on sort of 200-kilometer old tires, which are normally fit for scrap. But he's really quick on those tires. But I'm still doing the same time on new tires, which is kind of like you need to find those extra couple of attempts per corner because you're just not using that tire. So that's what I'm working on mainly with him currently. Um, and same as just kind of managing emotion. Young drivers, teenagers in particular, obviously hormones are flowing, so you have to really, really manage that. Alvis in the UAE Championship, really good driver, really, really nice like guy, but did let his emotion get to him a bit too much sometimes. But it's understandable, really, and that's kind of where I kind of broke down that barrier with him. You know, you could see him sort of getting worked up and emotional, sort of took him away out of where we were all doing a debrief and just sat him down, had a chat with him privately. And he opened up to me a lot after that. And we managed to make really good progress and get some quite decent results, a couple of top 10 finishes, and some good qualifying. So yeah, on the base of that, it's once you've broken down that barrier and get to know your driver, it's quite rewarding for both of you. Um, I mean, I'm a father, so I've got a 9-year-old boy myself. So you kind of have to sometimes find that way of getting in. I deal with parents quite well because I am one, so I'm very very good with dealing with parents. But that's also can be the negative side of it. You have to deal with the parents as well. So, but yeah, that's kind of where I'd start anyway.
I imagine when you're working with, a new driver, you kind of have to take on a completely new approach. with the driver. You can't, it's not like you can kind of come up with a perfected routine of this is how to shape someone into the driver I want them to be or the driver they can be, because each person kind of needs something different. How soon, like in the process of working with a new driver, how quickly can you kind of identify what a driver needs from you, what lessons they kind of need to learn? Is that kind of something you see straight away, or is that something that kind of emerges over time?
Yeah, so I mean, generally within sort of 1 or 2 sessions, you can see where they're confident and where they're not. Um, Once you've done those couple of sessions and you can work with them, it's usually the high speed stuff, which they struggle with. And it'll be that they're either braking too early or they're braking far too late, carrying far too much speed through the corner and then compromising the exit. And with the Formula Fords, because they're so like the mechanical side of it is all regulated, so every engine should produce the same amount of power. They will have, sort of one setting for wing and rear wing within sort of 2 or 3 holes generally per circuit. I mean, once you wander up the paddock, you can see where people are set, and at most you might see 2 or 3 Ks difference by the end of the straights, certainly in UAE. And that gives you that confidence to be able to, or certainly gives you the confidence to be able to show any driver that your car can do that. You just need to be able to have faith in the car. Um, I mean, there's always going to be the odd anomaly, how they've warmed the tyres up, and particularly tyre, you can get a bad set of tyres. That's no different to any series. But once they've kind of got that confidence in the car, everything follows, and they tend to trust you, and you know that okay, yeah, their car is the same setup as yours, particularly if you're in the same team. You can generally sort of go, look, your car is the same as that. Your car will do everything that his is doing. So go out. And it's always nice if you've got a driver who's not miles ahead, particularly in time, that you can send them out together. And particularly uh, drivers who have come from go-karting are very, very good at chasing. So, because naturally that's where they always have, they're used to being in a pack. So you can send them out and they'll always find time. I mean, the driver I'm working with currently, at one point, we were finding 1.5 seconds a lap at one point because he had that much of a steep improvement. And then it's kind of tough in a way because the other driver is also always improving. So they may come back in and go, oh, I'm still 7 tenths off him. So, but he's got 4 tenths quicker. So you've gained, 4 tenths as well. So it's good. And it's nice when it's always progressing like that because you've always got something to go with that driver going, right, look, this is where you're losing that little bit of time. WinTax is quite good in that you've got a variance channel so you can instantly see how much they're losing per corner, just by doing one thing. The driver I'm working with currently has muscle memory for he'll go onto full throttle after a corner and just have a little comfort lift. And I don't know why he's doing it. He doesn't know why he's doing it, but I can't get it out of him. Yes. We're working on that currently, but he's getting better, and I can see from the data from the beginning of the day to the end of the day that that lift will have got better, but it's still there, and that's the bit that I need to reprogram. And sometimes that is taking it off circuit as well. You need to go right. Um, what do you do in your morning kind of routine? And sometimes you need to just mix that up a little bit. I learned that from last year working in British touring cars. We were having a particular problem with a car and the driver that he was he was quick and just the car would go off or he was overdriving it and overheating the tires. And eventually we kind of broke that whole routine for the weekend, including what we used to go out for a meal on Friday night. It was always the same place. And we just went, okay, well, let's try that differently. And just threw that whole world into, well, okay, this is new. And basically, rather than being complete muscle memory, he just actually opened up and we were on track for being the best finish he'd had in touring cars at the time. until contact put us out, unfortunately. So, but that is the way with touring cars.
It is. It is the way with touring cars, indeed. I feel like with engineering, a lot of people think about the practical side of it, like what you're doing to the car, the kind of science behind it. But I don't think people realize how much psychology there is involved in it as well. And I mean, I have a psychology degree, so I mean that to me, like even having studied psychology for 3 years, no one really ever like mentions, how psychology is involved in so many different careers. But I've never really heard people speaking about it in the form of engineering, and I think it's really overlooked how important it is to the role, as well as people management. Because I saw you say on Instagram that working as an engineer is 30% actually doing the engineering and then 70% having those people management skills. And with that in mind, with all of those different things kind of combining together, I was wondering, what skills do you think make you a good engineer?
So I've done quite a few different well, not careers, jobs. It's probably the best way of putting it. So I ran my own garage at one point. So I've learned people management, time management, um, and sussing people out very quickly. I've got very, very good character judgment. Um, and then just learning how to deal with a situation on the fly is very important, particularly race engineering strategy. You can have the best run plan in the world, and then as soon as the lights go green, that strategy will go out the window. Um, even if it's just down to, as I had in the brick car, 6 hours, a safety car that we planned to do our stop in was 45 minutes long, and you can't refuel on the safety car. So, that kind of window that we had planned to take and put a load of fuel in, we couldn't do because we couldn't refuel. So we were lucky in the sense that we managed to pit before the safety car had come in or gone out to be able to put fuel in. But it, yeah, it just threw the complete strategy out the window. So it's like, right, okay, we're just gonna have to do this on the bounce. And that was one of my first engineering experiences, full time. Went won the 6 hours, and yeah, had mentally exhausted after that. But yes, an event at Silverstone last year in British touring cars, particularly as the people management side of it, was there was contact between two of the teammates, and I then had the other parties' parents trying to kick off to the parents of my driver, and it's trying to sort of manage that as well as keep on the radio to my driver, sort of tell him, you're doing okay, but just keep pushing. And meanwhile, trying to feed the driver's parent over to his RV and like, I will deal with that situation in a minute. Just yeah, you need to have a head that can pay attention to 8 different things at 4 different times.
Not easy.
No, it's certainly opened my eyes quite a lot.
I bet. Yeah, no, yeah, that is intense. Kind of that makes me think like back to obviously when you started getting into engineering. Firstly, is the job what you expected it to be when you first started on that career path? And also, secondly, how did you get onto that career path? Because I feel like it's something that a lot of people want to work in motorsport, especially I think now more than ever. So many people, seeing motorsport, I think it's more visible than ever. And a lot of people really dream to get those opportunities. So that's something I'm also really curious about.
Yeah, so I mean, I started properly engineering last year. That was a full-time career move. It's definitely a job that I enjoy, particularly when you get the results. But it's also learning to manage when you don't get those results. Touring cars was a very tough car to engineer, and it was also quite a tough lesson in the why isn't this working? You can be fed all sorts of promises by various members of the team, and then you can then go over the car yourself and find that something is not what you've asked it to be, or there's a component that's failed that hasn't been found. That happened a couple of times, and sometimes you have to grin and bear it, and sort of debrief with the powers above. But when you've got a driver who's emotional, is probably the best way of putting it. Understandably, because you want the results, same as they do. I think I take those failures quite personally. I think it's potentially what makes it very difficult to engineer. Is when you know that the car can do it, the driver can do it, but you don't get the results that you reserve or deserve from all of the work that you're putting in. But from that, you build yourself up. Um, where I started was at Swallows, as I said. So I was, well, I say it started at Swallows. That was where I kind of was doing it most of the time. I did race car preparation when I was running my own garage, and that was kind of what appealed my CV to them for building their motorsport program. Going there and dealing with gentleman drivers was quite nice. They're there just to have a good time, so the results don't really aren't as important to them as your sort of young driver who's trying to make a career out of it. The nice thing for Swallows was that I had pretty much everything I wanted, or if I could put a good case to the manager as to why I wanted it, invariably I'd end up with it. And once we'd worked through the problematic of the car, or certainly the very problems of the car, was that they weren't as experienced in building or modifying the cars to race as I had been.
Mm.
And so it was identifying certain problems areas, and then once we've done that, we can proceed and win as we did. But yeah, getting into motorsport was kind of where I realised that was what I wanted to do. Um, I certainly wanted to get off the spanners as quickly as I can. I mean, I'm 36 this year, so I'm quite late to the motorsport career path, but I'm glad I've made that jump, and I started doing a career, or sorry, a degree with the National Motorsport Academy. It appealed because it was sort of work, do your work from home. I can do it around my career. The work experience I don't have to do anywhere else. I can do where I'm working currently, which is quite nice. And from that, and certainly from the results that Swallows was getting, I got awarded the Race Engineer of the Year award with them. And that was against various people who were engineering a lot higher up than I was in the motorsport chain. So there was an engineer there who was running Max Verstappen, and various other sort of high end. I think there's a couple other people from F1 in there, which say yeah, it was nice to get rewards against that. And off the back of that, I sort of sent a couple of emails out to teams in British GT, just because that was kind of where I knew I wanted to go. I wanted to go and do GTs, and I've still kind of got a career goal of going to do the Le Mans 24 hours and NLS and VLN, that kind of European GT scene. The I off the back of the emails that I sent out, I got a response from Paddock Motorsport, which is Martin Plowman, who, funny enough, was actually doing the same course that I was doing. So he kind of, I'd only sent an email out saying, "Look, can I come and shadow an engineer so I can kind of get a taste for where I want to be?" And very much got dropped in the deep end with running a car, but we got some good results. We were running P3 most of the race. But the sister car for us was fighting for championship position, so we let them take the podium, which was it would have been nice to get a podium, but we you got to look for stuff for the team ultimately, and that was but a very much a baptism of fire. But I knew after that that yeah, this is what I want to do. Um, So then kind of looked for the next step, which was okay, well, going to number one as in British F4 for Argenti, which was a good time there. They're a good team. Certainly got a good couple of drivers this year from what I've seen as well. They will always be very good. And then I got the opportunity to engineer for British touring cars, and that was where I was like, right, I'm going to make this jump because unfortunately I couldn't mechanic for one team on the same weekend as engineer for the other. So that was kind of what made it a bit more difficult. But Michael was very good at understanding that and wished me my best.
Yeah, that's so cool. Like honestly, it's so funny because there you covered like pretty much like my next two questions in one, which is lovely for me. I was going to ask about the Race Engineer of the Year award, and then I was going to ask what have you got coming up later this year? I mean, I know we've spoken about British F4. Anything else that you've kind of got planned? And then also kind of what you see for the future of your career, where you want to go. I know you mentioned Le Mans there. Are there any other kind of goals that you've got that are top of the bucket list?
There's I'm a bit of a strange engineer in the way that there's certain things that I want to do, certain cars I'd like to engineer and see how they are. Um, so for instance, I always kind of planned when I started engineering, I was like, I want to run one of those AMG GT3s because they just seemingly turn up, do the job and go home. Um, and that was where I was with track focused this year, or sorry, well, this year and last year, I was engineering for them the KTM Expo GT4, which I engineer for them in British Endurance Championship. That was the one that I won the 6 hours with, and the we P1s in class every other race in British Endurance last year, so that was quite nice. We did a race this year at Donington, the 2 hours where we came P2 and P2 in class and P6 overall, I think it was. So yeah, it was the British Endurance Championship has got quite GT3 busy this year. I mean, last year there was one GT3 pounding round, and I think there's four in it this year. So we've kind of managed to wipe off any chance of overall podium now. So with the GT3s pounding round, but we found a good bit of time in a setup when we were testing yesterday. So we're looking forward to making some progress this year with that. Um, I do sort of even from a very very young age used to watch the V8 supercars over in Australia, and that's kind of something I'd like to go over and do, even if it's just a season. But yeah, obviously the Bathurst 1000 is always kind of a bucket list for most people who do that. Same as the VLN Nürburgring 24 hours is another one I'd like to do, but equally staying awake for 24 hours as an engineer sounds like utter hell.
Yeah, people always think of the drivers in these 24-hour races. No one mentions the engineers, do they?
Like, so I think the engineers probably have one of the toughest jobs in that because the mechanics of, obviously if everything's going okay, the mechanics get a rest between the pit stops, as amongst prepping bits and pieces here and there. But the engineer, you've got to be on top of it. You're on a 24 to 28 hour shift, generally speaking. There's always the pre-prep and the post debrief. Again, particularly with managing the drivers, managing the schedules and tires. If everything goes, Pete Tong as it can do, very often in the endurance races. Yeah, it's something that people don't understand in motorsport or don't realize. It's probably a better word, but in motorsport that you can do well, sort of your average day will be 18, 19 hours. Like yesterday, testing alone, I left the house at 2:30 yesterday morning, and I got back home at 11:15 in the evening. So, including my commute up and back. So yeah, you got to learn to love the road, or certainly find ways of passing time.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, well, we said that there's a lot of things that people don't realize or understand about engineering, and hopefully now the listeners do. So yeah, I feel like this has been so great to kind of shed some light on the career, which I think, as I said before, a lot of people just want to get into engineering, but maybe don't know the full ins and outs of it, don't know how to get there, or also just people who are just curious about it. Because I think there are so many roles in motorsport that go under the radar almost. And on this podcast, we're all about shedding some light on them. So thank you so much for all your insights today. It's kind of like a little behind the scenes, I feel like, into what your job is like, and it's been so interesting. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
No problem at all.
And again, obviously, as I always say, thank you to everyone who's listened, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. If you would like to leave a like and subscribe, or follow and a 5-star review, depending on which platform you're on. And you can find me at Down to the Tyre on all social media. Dan, do you just want to give a shout out to your socials as well?
Yes, I'm at DPP Ltd on Instagram and DPPE Limited on Facebook.
Amazing. Well, they will be linked in the description on all platforms, so people can get straight to them. And yeah, thank you so much again. I'll be back for another episode soon.